my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to a new episode of Updates from London. Here I am, Emanuele Barroso, the UK Secretary of the Roosevelt Movement. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to, from a very sunny and hot London, quite unexpectedly, but I guess it's summer here as well. So the topic of today is, it's got like a sort of Shakespearean fashion: lockdown or no lockdown. There is the questions. We've seen in the past few days in the UK that, actually on Tuesday, our PM Boris Johnson basically said, then from the 4th of July, the lockdown will be eased even more. So the restriction will be slowly lifted even further. And so you could see from the 4th of July, which is next Saturday, if I remember well, yes, we will see pubs, restaurants, hotels, and other hospitality venues to open up after 3 months of full lockdown. So the question that someone might ask themselves is: has lockdown actually worked, or was he worth it? Did he actually work, or was it just was he too steep a direction to have taken? Well, hence my video. I think it was been asked for because the headlines have there've been speculation the past few days about whether what Boris Johnson would announce last Tuesday. That's what he did. So I think we can sort of jump straight into the deep end and talk about whether lockdown has actually worked. Well, it's a very hard question to answer. And also I wanted to do this video because, there have been speculation in some media that there might be a second wave of coronavirus. So in case, God forbid, there's no second wave of coronavirus, a second outbreak, what will happen? What we want our politicians to do? Would we want another lockdown, or will we just, take the example of other countries like Sweden, for example, or the Netherlands, or even South Korea? And we will see throughout the course of this video that they've taken very different approaches. But I just want to start off by saying that there's no proof at all that the lockdown in the same manner that we in the UK or even Italy, for example, has actually worked. When I say lockdown, I mean full lockdown. As we the close example of Italy that we've got is probably the lockdown was actually stricter than in the UK. Police were giving out fines in sense of you're not allowed to leave the house. Everything was shut. Shops, restaurants, all the essential shops were open, so what people can buy and could go and buy their food. In the UK, it was exactly the same thing. But I think some people might argue that the lockdown in the UK was actually a bit softer. In a way, I guess police were not sort of dishing out fine on the spot if you leave the house, although they were trying to. But there hasn't been any major sort of news or any sort of major action by the police to actually find who was intentionally leaving the house. Although the vast majority of people was they were following the guidelines of the Prime Ministers to stay at home. Also, for the purpose of this video, I want to analyze different cases. For example, if we have Italy, which together with other countries implemented a strict lockdown, and then you've got the case of the UK, which we could argue was slightly softer. And then you've got the case of Sweden or even South Korea. They didn't when I say they didn't implement any lockdown at all, I'm not saying they didn't implement any measures, which is probably what most mass media were led us to believe. They did implement measures, but there was no full lockdown. I mean, most of the shops were actually open. And when I say most shops, most non-essential shops, like like pubs, restaurants, for example, they remain open, although social distancing measures were implemented. But the vast majority, the life as we know it, carried on. Carried on as per normal. I just want to actually, before we delve into the discussion, just want to sort of show you like a little, show you a little graph. Let me see if I can do this properly. And I'm sorry if I, there you go. Hope you'll be able to see this. This is actually was taken from outside our world data.org. And as you can see, I've taken on, if you can see the first graph, figure number 1, I believe, the total confirmed COVID-19 cases. And as you can see, since sort of the start of the outbreak, you can see these are like 5 curves: the United Kingdom, Italy, Sweden, Singapore, and South Korea. And as you can see, in those 2 countries where lockdown measures, and when I say strict lockdown measures, were implemented, the numbers still kept on going up. I want to bore you with some numbers because I think it's important if I give some data. It's important if I use some data, so we set a tone. We can sort of set the picture of it. So we know what lockdown meant in Italy and the UK. In Sweden, for example, it is not true. We can say that full lockdown was not implemented, but museums were still closed. All the major sort of sporting events were cancelled. The gathering of more than sort of 50 people or 50 plus were also cancelled. For example, towards the end of March, the visits to nursing home were banned because, of course, elderly people were considered at risk. And so in a way, the lockdown was strict for actually most schools were open, apart from I think pre-grade and grade schools. The rest of the schools were actually open. And of course, the lockdown was stricter for elderly people. They were encouraged not to take public transport. They were encouraged to comply to social distancing rule. And also, they basically were encouraged to keep their sort of whereabouts to a bare minimum. Actually, South Korea, the example of South Korea is exactly the same. As you can see, South Korea, although they had, South Korea was the same. They did not lock down. The country was pretty much open, and they got so. You can see actually the curve of South Korea is actually barely there. The tactic of South Korea was made up of 3 different stages: aggressive testing, contact and tracing, and then isolation. The secret that South Korea did so well in terms of coronavirus cases is that there was an aggressive policy of testing since the very beginning. And although they were criticized, we were talking about like in January, the government got the grip with the epidemic, with the coronavirus, and they implemented an aggressive policy of testing and tracing, and then isolation for those people who were sort of deemed to have coronavirus or to have contact with people with coronavirus. This is why they kept the their curve almost in a way flat. Let me also give you some more numbers, and I'm sorry if I keep on boring you with numbers, but on a population of the UK as 66, let's say a bit more than 66 million, the COVID cases, I'm not talking about deaths, I'm just talking about COVID cases, were about 306. 306, a bit more than 306. So we're talking about 0.5% of the population contracted coronavirus. We could do the same about Italy. Italy was, the population of Italy is slightly smaller than the UK, it's over 60 million people. And we've got about 239,000, a bit more than that, contracted coronavirus, also in terms of cases. So the 4% of the population contracted coronavirus. And I could say the same. And bear in mind that the density of population, or the population density of the UK, is about 207 inhabitants per square kilometer. The population density of Italy was actually was very close to this. I think we're talking about about 205 people per sort of square kilometer. And again, I guess people could argue that. Back to where we are. I guess people could argue that but Sweden didn't have to go into lockdown because we're talking about only 10 million people in Sweden, and also the population density was 24 inhabitants per square kilometer. But what about South Korea? What about it? I mean, the population, we're talking about 52 million, and the population density was we're talking about 527, give or take, inhabitants per square kilometer. So also with this double the amount. If we're reasoning in terms of population density and how easily the virus can spread, the population density of South Korea was actually double the ones of both Italy and the UK. They're still going to lock down. So what is the secret? I'm sorry if I keep on giving numbers, but I think we can sort of agree that a full lockdown hasn't benefited. We haven't got the raw data to actually say, yes, lockdown did actually work in those countries. It didn't work for a number of reasons. Let me just go back very quickly to the first graph that we saw. Bear with me 1 second. There you go. So the number of cases kept on rising in both the UK and Italy, namely countries went into full lockdown, and the number of cases in Sweden. So in terms of, although Sweden and Sweden and South Korea, I'll put also the example of Singapore, who did not actually go into full lockdown per se, as we've seen in the UK and sort of Italy, but the numbers are still the same. The numbers are probably even better in those countries that didn't go into full lockdown rather than full lockdown like the UK and Italy have done. And also, if you go to the second graph, how rapidly, in terms of confirmed COVID cases, how rapidly are they increasing? And we see that the curves of the United Kingdom, Italy, Sweden, and Singapore, or South Korea, again, are pretty similar. So let me just go back to us. There you go. So we have literally no reason to believe that full lockdown did actually work. We went into full lockdown on thinking that was actually the government was acting on behalf of, I think, their health council, saying that if we do not go into full lockdown, we're going to have 500,000 deaths due to coronavirus, and we'll have about 80% of the population infected with it, which never happened. At best, we have 15% of the population which got infected with coronavirus. So that didn't happen. And also, from 500,000, the numbers, we went into full lockdown, was at one scale back to 250,000, and then it got scaled back to 50,000, then 40,000, and then 30,000. At the moment, the cases of coronavirus again in the UK. Sorry if I see my notes, but it's loads of numbers. We stand at 366,000 cases, and we're talking about, let's say, about 40,000 people died, which is tragic. But the reason to go full lockdown, there was no reason there was no ground to implement a full lockdown. Why? Because even those countries in which we've seen, like Sweden, even the Netherlands, for example, they had a very similar policy to Sweden. They did not have to go into full lockdown because, and we've seen the numbers. I mean, our curves in terms of the way, we've been hearing all this type of buzzword, flattening the curve. But even if let's say even 3 weeks after we implemented lockdown, the curve did flatten, did start to go down, but still to date, we have no reason to believe that lockdown actually caused that. Why? Because we don't know. We know very little about this virus. We know very little about this virus, and also consider the number of deaths, which is around 40,000 ballpark figure, which is is still in the same ballpark as for example, back in 2014, 2015 in the UK, the normal flu caused about 28,000 deaths, which is sad, which is tragic. But we're talking about here in the same kind of, we're 40,000, 20,000. They are sort of around the same ballpark figure. So even when it comes to raw data and numbers, we still haven't got the reason why we went into full lockdown. So God forbid there will be a second, and we hope not, there will be a second wave. There's no reason that we should go into full lockdown. We should probably, the example of Sweden, for example, is probably paramount. The media was screaming that Sweden didn't go into lockdown, but they did implement some measures. The one I was sort of talking about. So they did, they thought, the most vulnerable people were elderly people. So let's shield those, but let's keep the rest let's keep the rest of society going. Let's keep the population going. We did a video last week and 2 weeks ago as well. What are the costs of lockdown, a full lockdown? In this day and age, we basically applied the same kind of strategy as the Black Death 400 years ago today. But today, we've got an economy which is we as a country, we as people, we're so interdependent with each other that is no lockdown is a strategy can only be implemented for 1, 2, 3 weeks max, and then everything has to go back to normal. Our lives, our livelihoods, the livelihoods of those people who lost their jobs because of lockdown, because the market all of a sudden stopped, and we've seen that the UK economy went down by over 20 points, and about 600,000 jobs were lost. And people are actually predicting that by the end of the year, about 3 million jobs will be lost because of this, because of a policy that had no ground. To date, we still have no reason to believe the lockdown actually did work. And also, what are the costs of lockdown? The actual implication of lockdown. These are, of course, we're talking about numbers, but these are not just numbers. These are people's lives. People's livelihoods that depend on a fully functioning economy. As I said, people lost their jobs, people put on furlough, and I invite everyone to see our previous videos in which we talk about how the UK was sort of shielded himself from the utterly scary scenario of a deep depression. Again, today. So what's the secret? The secret is not how to fight coronavirus. Coronavirus is a virus which we know very little about. We know it's a very sort of scary virus, but it's not as sort of lethal as some people might lead us think. The 99.9% of those infected with coronavirus actually, so we're talking a very small margin that actually died. Those people who died had pre-existing conditions, or they were elderly. Their immune system was not sort of working as was not working as well as it should have for a number of reasons. But like I said, 99.9% of the population did recover from coronavirus. And again, we don't know much about this virus. What are the symptoms of coronavirus? Everyone talks about respiratory symptoms. Okay, but the main symptoms of coronavirus are no symptoms. Most of the people are as asymptomatic. So again, now there's a bit of like the run to trying to find a vaccine to fight coronavirus, but there's no. I think that the road that will lead to that is still very, still very long because simply because we don't know enough about this coronavirus, and also because if we had done testings at a very early stage, it is probably one of the faults of the UK government. I'm talking about UK government because this is updates from London. If they had done aggressive testing, like South Korea did, for example, or other countries did, they could have prevented the spread of coronavirus even further. So the key is not actually going to full lockdown, because the costs of a full lockdown are too high. It comes to a high price. Not just by economy, but also when I put it again. Sorry, if I talk about the economy, it's about people's lives, people's livelihoods that depend on a fully functioning economy. And also, there's a charity called it is called Refuge. They've had, because of the lockdown, they've had their spike in calls regarding domestic abuse. The calls, the daily calls have increased by 49%. They've reached up to 400 calls a day, which I guess could be a sort of is one of the direct consequences of lockdown. Mental health issues is another sort of consequence of that media have been talking about has one of the worst consequences of the full lockdown. Again, in the UK, for example, things are starting to get better. Lockdown measures are being eased even further. Although going back to probably normal, I think we are we are still far from that. So by looking at all these examples of other countries which didn't go into full lockdown but still implemented security measures, safety measures to protect their people, and also the most vulnerable people which could suffer from coronavirus, we've seen that coronavirus still can be sort of fought and defeated. Again, when it comes to coronavirus, I think at least the UK government has sort of has adopted the modelling. The fight against coronavirus is based on modelling, but modelling, if there isn't enough data to begin with, it's pretty. It gives you like a picture which is not comprehensive. Maybe we've talked about that at the beginning, 80% of people were thought will be infected if we didn't go into lockdown, and then at the end, although we went to full lockdown, the number is probably around 15%. So way lower than forecasts. So also lockdown is not just bad for economy and people's livelihoods. By doing a full lockdown, you tend to you end up sort of shielding. You end up affecting more people, way more people. You end up, when I say end up affecting, as I'm referring to end up affecting more people that whose livelihoods will be affected than the actual people affected by coronavirus. So you create you start a mechanism, you engage in a mechanism where far more people will be actually affected, not just by the illness itself, but the consequence of the illness. So in terms of how to fight so this is the end of my video. How to fight coronavirus. Lockdown has been, we found that lockdown does not work. When I say lockdown, full lockdown, implementing a full lockdown does not work. We need other measures. And when I say we need other measures, we need other measures of, of course, social distancing. Of course, public places have to take some precautions. But let's shield, first and foremost, those people that the stats have actually told us that they suffer more, they're most vulnerable in the face of coronavirus. I'm talking about, elderly people, people with pre-existing conditions. Fine, let's just, let's let's sort of shield them first and foremost. Now, when it comes to the rest of the population, we have to lead a normal life. There's no other way. Otherwise, we're going to affect more people than we actually. We end up affecting more people than we actually have to. That we need to, and more people, because of the full lockdown, will suffer the effects of coronavirus. Not just physically, but also on their life, on their livelihoods, and their struggle. Their daily struggle to provide for their family. I've been, with this video, it's been actually, I've tried to sort of pull my heart out because, by looking at different stats, different cases, and where the lockdown is actually worked. I mean, I've tried to understand. I've tried to tell you that a full lockdown doesn't actually work for a number of reasons. And we've talked about other countries who have still won the battle against coronavirus, but didn't go into full lockdown. Sweden, South Korea, the Netherlands, for example, which I didn't mention, but it's one of those countries. We know very little about this coronavirus, and the stats so far have basically told us, listen, coronavirus is a nasty bug, a nasty virus, but it's not as lethal as they've sort of led us to believe at the very beginning. So our modeling was wrong. And the stats have told us completely something else. And again, from an economics perspective, lockdown is not feasible. In an economy in which we are all sort of intertwined with each other, interconnected, we cannot afford ourselves to be months and months locked down. And the result, we've already seen the results. The economy down 20 points, tons of million jobs, thousands of lives put on the line, because something which could have been prevented, and which didn't have to be put in place. So that's my message. So God forbid there will be a second wave, and hopefully not. Let's pray not. Full lockdown is not the answer. What is the answer? The answer are safety measures. Let's shield the most vulnerable. Let's implement safety measures. But let's carry on life as we know it. Because let's carry on life as we know it, and let's try also for not just for ourselves, but for our next generations, for our kids who probably have been affected by especially from a personality or mental point of view. Let's just do it for them, for the next generations, and let's learn from these stats. Let's learn from these facts that we know to implement, God forbid, another pandemic in the future, or a second wave of coronavirus will happen. And again, hopefully not, because it's such a tragic and sad happening, that according to what we know so far, we can then implement a more effective and better sort of strategy to fight coronavirus and any other virus that might come our way. I thank you so much for listening. I've been longer than I've sort of talked for longer than I should have. Thanks again. Hopefully, my graphs and all the news that I've told you so far have made sense. And this is my point of view. And I just want to, I want to wish you happy Friday, happy weekend. Please do follow us on our Facebook page, Road for Movement UK, which we try and update daily. Also, we have a website and a blog, www.rm-london.co.uk. And until next week, goodbye. Thank you so much for listening.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat begin to advance